Chapter 21, Early 20th Century, presented by Group 9 members Omar Alcantar, Brittany Ellickson, Ashlyn Lawrence, Olivia Schmidt, and Mary Williamson. The early 20th century. The early 20th century saw much change due to the Industrial Revolution. Thousands of new jobs were created, there was a longer life expectancy, better vaccines were created, and an overall increase for public health occurred. Violent revolutions began in countries like Russia, Mexico, and China due to class divisions. Innovations in education were booming as well during this time period. The Wright brothers fly a plane, Einstein comes out with the theory of relativity, and new technologies and inventions made businesses boom. Purpose of artwork during this time period. The nature of reality developed to include exploration of the subconscious mind. This new curiosity began to show through in the purpose of art in the early 20th century, because artists wanted to explore their own subconscious world and thoughts and attempt to express this. To preserve the first impulse and feeling behind a work of art, to revolt against academic painting and create a novel aesthetic, to provide a spiritual nourishment for the modern world. Artists looked at non-Western and ancient cultures and they turned away from Renaissance. Artists' purpose in this century was to overturn the rigid authority and the rules of the Renaissance era, which dominated the Western artistic thought for 500 years. Key terms: Fauvism, an expressive style divergent from traditional Renaissance elements, which included flattened forms, bright colors, and inspiration from thought rather than reality. Les Faux translates to wild beast and is a nickname given to a group of painters led by Henri Matisse. They drew inspiration from the expressive color of Van Gogh. They made their own use of color, intense and subjective. Expressionism, a general term for art that focuses on the inner feelings rather than objective depictions. Key terms: German Expressionism. German artists, a part of this style, used vivid colors, angular simplifications, and provided dramatic color contrast. They sought to address the human condition, including elements like sorrow, passion, spirituality, and mysticism. Collage, also called pasted paper. Futurist, use the repetition of a subject on multiple planes to convey the idea of motion on a flat surface. Key points: Characteristics of the century. Rapid change, government control over inspections, education, currency, and border control. Diversity. Individualism. Art sought to express the thoughts and sights of the self. Exploration. Artists were inspired by scientific discovery. Art styles and techniques were drastically different in this century than in centuries before, which were inspired by the Renaissance. The Faux and Expressionism. Fauvism, 1905 to 1907. Developed from the study of Cézanne's pictorial constructions and colored planes and was inspired by the usage of colors from Van Gogh and Gauguin. Included fewer details to keep the viewer from becoming visually distracted. Henri Matisse, the leader of the Faux movement, he had a great deal of knowledge about human anatomy and drawing. In his painting, Joy of Life, he greaters the simplicity through a childlike quality. The Faux and Expressionism. Expressionism, art which emphasizes inner feelings. Specifically focusing on German Expressionism, it is the combined styles of Cubism, African culture, and German Gothic art. It includes distant colors, chopped out shapes, and crude brushwork. It creates art out of an inner necessity. Cubism, the most influential movement of the early 20th century. Color is secondary to structure in Cubism. The movement was started by Pablo Picasso, who made the first breakthrough, and George Braque, who developed specific vocabulary regarding Cubism. The two phases of Cubism 1. The analytic phase from 1910 to 1911. This included subjects were analyzed from various viewpoints, and the artist attempted to break down the subject into various parts. The second phase, synthetic phase, 1912, worked to build up or combine materials like one would in a collage. A movement towards abstract sculpture. Early 20th century sculpture continued to shift from naturalistic to abstract art. The Kiss is an example of this. Abstract sculpture by Brancusi and naturalistic sculpture by Rodin. Abstract sculpture. Constantine Brancusi. He makes a transition from naturalism to abstract art. An earlier work, Sleep, has an appearance similar to Rodin's romantic naturalism. In Sleeping Muse 1, he simplifies the subject. Finally, in The Newborn, he strips the head to bare essentials. With each sculpture, Brancusi achieves greater strength and meaning by simplifying the forms and faces to their essence. As a result, his sculptures invite contemplation and differing interpretations. The modern spirit in America. The modern spirit in America was pushed to existence by the unveiling of many European artworks in the Armory Show in New York in 1913. The show included key works in many styles, including Cubism, Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and Fauvism. Georgia O'Keeffe created many pieces that mostly consisted of abstractions based in nature. She found emptiness stimulating. Frank Lloyd Wright, architect that designed prairie houses, which omitted walls between living and dining spaces. He changed the way contemporary designers make living spaces. The modern spirit in America. Alfred Stieglitz, an American photographer, reconsidered the geometry of design on the picture plane. He made major contributions toward establishing photography as an art of comparable importance to the traditional media. The steerage took on a similar style that Picasso had developed, where form and shape was a priority. Picasso stated, "This photographer is working in the same spirit as I am." The image looked chopped up, almost as if it could have been two images. Futurism and motion included a sense of speed, change, and motion. Celebrated machinery and the new faster speed which the world was working at due to the Industrial Revolution. Giacomo Balla, in the painting to the right, the artist wanted to express the feeling of a car passing. Artist presentation. Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso was born in 1881 in Malaga, Spain. His father was an art teacher. At the age of 14, he began at the School of Fine Arts in Barcelona. In 1897, he won his first gold medal at a hometown exhibit. At the age of 16, he entered into Madrid's Royal Academy. He died in 1973 at the age of 91. Artist presentation, Pablo Picasso. Unique qualities of culture and time period from which Pablo Picasso is from. Pablo Picasso's work evolved rapidly from symbolism and post-impressionism to expressive portraits of social outcasts and poor people. He drew inspiration for Cubism from abstractions of African sculpture. Imagination and creativeness moved and inspired others. This photo provides an example of African sculpture in which he drew his inspiration from. Overall purpose of Pablo Picasso's work and other artwork of the time. His purpose was to reject the accepted European qualities of ideal beauty and overturn many of the traditions of Western art. Pablo wanted formal structure to be the focus instead of color, which he thought of as an emotional distraction. His usage of newspaper, sheet music, wallpaper, and similar items were presented in new ways. Other artwork of the time, in the style of Cubism, sought to show how the mind sees a subject and not how the eyes see. Instead of showing one angle, the whole canvas depicts many views. Analytical model of art criticism. Pablo Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, 1907. Reaction and overall emotion. The initial reaction to Picasso's revolutionary piece is one of shock and uneasiness. The overall expressions of the women are gruesome and intense, drawing fear out of the viewer. Description. In Les Demoiselles, there are many visual elements to consider. Picasso implies a depth to the scene made apparent by the overlap in the placement of the feet at the bottom of the painting, 3. And the overlap between the two women depicted toward the right side, 4. There is an overwhelming use of geometric shapes in the piece, in both the subjects and the background of the painting. As you move your gaze from the outside of the painting towards the center, the bodies of the women become less and less rigid, being hard, straight lines for soft, curved lines. 2. The women at the center are in general depicted in a brighter fashion than the rest of the women. Their overall hue is more even, with few variations in tint and intensity. This contrasts dramatically with that of the 3 women towards the outside of the painting. Most notably, the women towards the right side, 4, whose hue and value change dramatically between the face and body. The women in the center are also shown in a more relaxed, flowing pose, their hands placed behind their head, both in a contrapposto position, where the poses of the women towards the exterior are more rigid and forced. The frontmost woman on the right, body facing the back of the scene, head turned almost 180 degrees, is put in an almost unnatural position. The unsettling expression on her face seems to accentuate this point, with a sternness implying that her pose is difficult to maintain. The shading on the faces of the outer 3 women also seems to imply a degree of light, practically emanating from the other 2 in the center. With all of this in mind, what was Picasso's aim at expressing in this piece? Interpretation. In the art period leading up to Picasso's creation of Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, the Renaissance, the dominant ideals of beauty, particularly female beauty, were clear. Women were depicted as soft, curving, and fair-skinned. They were expected to be depicted in humble, pure, or weak positions, which reinforced the concept that female beauty was centered around fragility. In his piece, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, Pablo Picasso meant to bring forward this overly popularized impression of female beauty. The women at the center of this piece, both exemplifying the basic ideals of this concept, seem to give off a light or brightness. This light, in turn, throws a shade over the rest of the women, which are depicted in less delicate poses. This seems to point to the overall significance of the painting. The beauty of the human image is much broader than what was previously accepted as a part of the European culture. Picasso aimed to change the way people looked at the human body and evoked some thought towards what key characteristics of it we perceive as beautiful. In this work, Picasso showed that the image of the women is not constricted to simply the scope of idealism, once thought of during the Renaissance period. Rather, he offered women can be strong and at times even aggressive. The human body does not always comply to the romanticized images held by society. And no matter how much we idolize our ideal images, the ideal is not all that exists. Evaluation. From a socio-cultural standpoint, Les Demoiselles is invaluable. The statement that it made in regards to the perceptions of female beauty and the human body were groundbreaking. This painting is considered to be what ended the lingering ideals of Renaissance art and what opened the door to the development of Cubism. It is because of its importance in not only the artistic world, but also its application in the cultural perceptions of the human body that we value this painting at over $50,000.